guys, I'm Kate, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about how I work on multiple stories at once, and oftentimes even writing multiple stories per day. This was actually a request I got from Miss Ducks a couple of weeks ago, and then I've had a couple people follow up with wanting more information, especially after I showed y'all my spreadsheet and my tracking my words for 30 days video, which I am still doing, and I'm really excited to start seeing like quarterly and yearly things if I keep it up, so that's gonna be fun. But anyways, time to talk about how I work on multiple projects at the same time. As always, this is how I multitask in multiple projects, and what works for me may not work for you guys, but it's definitely something to try, especially as NaNoWriMo approaches and you might have different works in different stages. Like you want to start working on a totally new project to be fully in the spirit of NaNoWriMo, but also you just finished this other project or you're not totally done with this project that you've been working on for a year. I'm here for you. I have two personal basic ground rules and then a bonus unofficial rule. I mean, they're all unofficial, but you guys are gonna get my point. Rule number one, no stories in the same genre told from the same point of view. I write in a bunch of different genres, usually young adult in all of its various forms, mystery, and then now romance. So this rule is really important to me. If I'm working on two young adult stories, they both can't be in third person. Does that make sense? Like I can be writing a mystery in third person and I can be writing a young adult in third person, but I need that genre distinction. But why, you might be asking? To keep the voices from blending. It's as simple as that. I think tonally, voices can be so different, even from novels within the same genre, but when you're working on projects from the exact same genre with the exact same narrative point of view, like, you're just asking for trouble. Rule number two, no same genre stories in the same stage of writing. Say that 5 times fast. Same genre story, same stage of writing. So even if they don't violate the first rule, like I have one YA that's in third person and one YA that's in first person, I still wouldn't start them at the same time. I wouldn't allow them to be in the same draft stage. One of them has always got to be above the other. But why? For me, this cuts down on the bleed over between ideas, especially because I consider myself to be like a discovery writer, at least in the 0 draft stage and even well on to the first or second sometimes. You just don't want to have these competing ideas in the same genres, especially if you're at that discovery stage. And that takes me to my unofficial rule number 3, which is priorities. I like working on multiple stories at one time because whenever I sit down at that keyboard, I can just work on whichever one I find the most inspiration for. And when I've exhausted all of my current ideas, or like I'm kind of feeling something different, I can switch to this other story. And I truly believe that that inspiration will feed itself, even if they're totally different genres, even if they're told in totally different point of views, even if, I mean, I don't write poetry, but if one was a poem, like if I was writing a freaking long form poem and, you know, a freaking short story, I still feel like the inspiration would feed itself. They would feed into each other. Switching between projects, even within the same day, you know, like helps keep my creative juices flowing, and it helps me write longer, and it allows me to enjoy the different storytelling methods. But at some point you do have to prioritize. For me, this is usually when I have a story in the later stage of the drafting process. I'm talking like draft 3 or 4 or 5, at the point where I'm getting beta readers' feedback. When I promise someone a specific date that I'd like them to be available so that I can send them my story, or like a time period or whatever, I need to make sure that my story is ready by that date. I do not want my beta readers waiting on me, and I do schedule this ahead because scheduling's freaking hard, y'all. So it's never gonna be pushed back by me, which means that if I've promised this story to someone else, if it is time for that beta reader to get it, I'm going to work on that first every single day. That is my main priority. All of the other stories can happen later in the day when I've made sufficient progress on this story that's about to go out. And there is something nice about having a concrete deadline when you're in those later stages. There's nothing quite like a deadline to both terrify you and propel you forward. And now I said that I work on that project first because I like to wake up in the morning, and that is when I get most of my creative writing done, is that the first thing when I wake up, that first project, that will be my most important project because that's how my brain works. If you work best at night, save that story for night. Or if you need like a warm-up period for your brain to really get the words flowing or whatever, go ahead and save that project for the time where you think that you will be doing your best work. So in that regard, it's kind of just like know yourself or get to know yourself. Try out different things in order to figure out what time works best for you. Anyways, you get my point. The main rules are down, so let's move on to the extra tips. I don't know that the idea of writing multiple projects scares people so much as having to juggle them all. Because sometimes if you're really in the flow for this one story for weeks at a time, which I have had happen, like I've talked about that in recent videos, I'll link that up above and down below, when I was just obsessed with one story. So I'm not saying you have to do this every single day, but the key here was not to forget my other stories in the meantime. And the way that I personally do that is that I have a spreadsheet. Here's the thing, it tracks all of my projects, and not just the ones that I'm like kind of sort of working on or the ones that are in the very late stages. No, I'm talking about even just ideas. I have little morsels, like a one sentence that at the time I was like, that's fascinating, but I don't have time to explore it right now. So I jotted it down in my phone. I moved that over into a tab in my spreadsheet, and I'm like, this is just where I want to keep my good ideas. I love keeping track of it this way. One, because I've talked about on this channel before, I have terrible memory, so I have to write it down unless, you know, the muses would just suck it away from me. I would never see that idea again. So tip number one, step number one, and like organizing all of your ideas in your multiple projects is write them all down. Have a spreadsheet, have something, and then have some kind of highlight system or bullet point system or however you want to do it to signify to yourself that these are in certain kind of stages. So for me, if it's just an idea, I have that in a separate tab, but the second that becomes more than just an idea, like let's say I wrote a chapter for it or I wrote a basic outline for it or whatever, that moves into another section. It's denoted a little bit differently. And if you're like me, you can even have a little section for projects that are on hold. My personal opinion is that everyone should wait 2 months between when they finish a draft to start a new version of that draft. Not everyone likes to do it this way, but that is my very general advice I give people and that I follow myself. So when I do that, I change the color to be like, it is on hold, and then I put a little dash and I put what draft number it's on. So in my mind, I don't forget that I have that story. I don't forget that it's in like this waiting process. And that's actually how I came up with the story that I'm going to be writing or rewriting for NaNoWriMo this year. I was looking at things, I was kind of feeling I wanted to have a project that I hadn't been currently working on, so it really felt new, but not a whole new draft. And I saw that one and I was instantly hit with, ooh, I have to write that. It had been on hold for over a year, but I got that file. The other thing here is that I love organization. Is this too much? You can be the judge. Do not worry if this is not your thing. I just think it's a great way to keep track of everything. If you're better able to like keep it all in your mind, then kudos to you and teach me your ways. I don't know that it would ever actually absorb, but I'd love to hear about it. And tip number 3 is never think that you're actually stuck in a writing rut, if that makes sense. I do believe that there's such a thing as writer's block for a particular story if you really just don't know how to work out a plot problem, or like you can't figure out a character's motivation, and so when you look at that document you're like, I just don't know how to write this. Totally understand that. But if you're working on multiple projects at a time, this is a great way to like cast that to the side, don't let it bother you. And again, because I personally think that, you know, projects can feed into each other and help inspire the other, just work on something new. Look at your little spreadsheet or whatever document, look at your little list of ideas that you might have stored on your phone or something, and be like, you know what, I'm gonna try writing this one. There you go, now you're kind of working on multiple projects at one time. Those are all of my tips. I do want to answer some questions, which I think I already touched on, but do I write on every story every day? No. Do I write in multiple stories every day always? No. Some days I only work on one story. Some days all of my words, some weeks, all of my words are dedicated to this one project. Again, I had that weird time where I was obsessed with a story. So, still don't understand. Still don't understand. But I think that on average I work on at least 2 stories per day. So the other little bonus tip is if that's something you kind of want to introduce, but you're not sure how, I like to get up and change my scenery. I think this is good for a lot of things writing related, but definitely for like, get up, go on a walk, when you come back, write in a different story than the one you were writing on before. Or if you're at university or college or something and you have time between different classes, go ahead and like make time between class 1 and 2, this project, time between class 3 and 4, this story. But let me also say that the times where I was writing way less, when I was working my corporate job or even when I was in college, what I would do wasn't so much writing in multiple stories a day as I would write in project 1 and I would write it from beginning to end, then I would put it on a hold, and in those 2 months that I personally think you should wait, in that 2-month period, I will work on the next story. And so then when I'm ready for this one again, I'll bring it back. So you're working on multiple projects in a year, and I still count that. I still think that's working on multiple projects. And I think, again, I think that's great. Y'all, I'm such a big proponent on working on multiple stories, and that's just because it works for me. And I think it's fun, and it's advice that I give people if they're stuck in another story. Write something else, try something else out. You literally never know what's going to happen or what from this idea you realize actually works way better in this story and vice versa. So yeah, clearly I'm a very big fan of this method. All right, that's all the tips and advice and the kind of like how I do it that I have. Please comment down below and let me know if you work on multiple projects at once. And if you do you write them in the same day, week, month, or do you do that kind of like alternating method? And if you do, please also comment down below your tips for working on multiple projects at once. I think we could like crowdsource this and we can all brainstorm new ideas together. And finally, if you haven't worked on multiple projects at once, have you ever wanted to, or do you really have like a single dedicated focus to one project at a time? Or like some of my friends, have you always just had this one story and that is like your story and the one you want to tell, so you're just kind of waiting for other projects until you're able to tell this story fully? Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you guys again for requesting this video, and I will see y'all with a new one very soon. Bye! Especially after I showed y'all my but when you're doing the exact same genre with the exact but when you're working on projects with the oh my gosh. Rule number 2, no same genres in the same what?